Welcome back to Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom. I'm Brendan Davis, your host, and this week's guest is Fei Wu. Now, if that name sounds familiar, that is possibly because Fei is a returning champion guest. She is our very first person who has now done 2 full episodes of the show all by herself. I want to have Fei back on for a number of reasons, specifically to discuss everything she's been up to lately that is related to China, which is quite a lot. Fei's back home in Boston now, but she recently visited her mom in Zhuhai for 3 weeks, and she did a lot of interviews while she was here, both for her current show, Fei's World, as well as for another new show she's been developing, which is kind of the main reason we're talking today. In this episode, we talk a lot about the dominant Chinese audio platform called XimalayaFM. Now, I say platform and not podcast app, because in the very Chinese way of doing things, Ximalaya isn't just a podcast app, it's a media universe unto itself. And if you want to be a big deal in China, you've really got to get on it. Fei is a Chinese person who speaks the language but has now lived more than half her life in the U.S. She's kind of an ideal person to help open up that platform to a more international audience, and I'm pretty excited to see what she does with it. On a related note, Fei has definitely inspired me to find an intern myself and get this show of mine back up to date and active on Ximalaya again. So if you are a bilingual Chinese-English speaker, you have some spare time, and you want to either earn college credit or just get an inside view at how we make the podcast donuts here, please let me know somehow, and we can have a meeting and talk all about that. Now, I have several other updates this week. The first I want to tell you about is that I'm launching a new venture called BDC. Now, that stands for, wait for it, Brendan Davis Consulting. I know it's a very creative name, but it makes a lot of sense if you consider that it really is about me trying to use my China knowledge and experience as well as my big network and help people from the outside world who are trying to get into China or deal with a specific task or adventure or even maybe a bigger project. I talk all about that on my website. If you are interested in working in China and you think I could help, please reach out. Another update is that I am finally writing a book. This is fulfilling something I've wanted to do for a very long time, and I think it might make my mom happy, hopefully, and proud. I am writing a Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom inspired ebook. Now, the book will reference many interviews that I've done, plus I'll be reaching out to various show guests as I get further down the road for additional information, and of course also to get your permission if you have been quoted in this, so I'll get your permission to include you. If you're one of those people, I'll be in touch. But it will also talk in more general terms about what I've learned, both from the people who are on the show, people I know off the show, people who some of whom want to remain anonymous for reasons that will become clear in the relevant stories. But it's also, it's a little bit of a memoir for me, which maybe seems slightly pretentious, but I don't mean it that way. It's really meant to share what I've learned in my own experience, but by way of the commonality of all these other people's experiences, which is kind of the big point of this show. So one thing that would really help me out is that if people would pre-order it on my website. I know that's a lot to ask. There's going to be a form on the website that's going to talk about it just a little bit. By the time I'm done recording this, there should be a form up on my website right now, and I'm going to put a retail price on it of 108 RMB. That's roughly $16 US, but pre-orders will get it for a serious discount. So please check it out and make a hungry podcaster happy. One last note that's got me in the middle of it is that I have just launched a Patreon page for this show. You can check that out. It is also linked on the website, crazyinagoodway.com. I really want to take the very eclectic and spread out community that we have for the show and put us in one place. And you can join the community for only $1 a month. You can get updates and see things that you wouldn't see otherwise. And then, of course, there are ways to sponsor the show to a greater degree. I decided to create this tier for $5 US a month. You can actually get a blog post that has every episode's direct download, so you can get the MP3 directly, and so you don't have to use a podcast app. You can actually easily pull that down, even if you're not very technically savvy. You can easily grab that and listen to it offline. There are a lot of podcasters who offer this as a feature for their member-supported sites, and so please check out the Patreon. Let me know what you think, and I would love to have you there. Even the $1 a month entry level would mean a lot to me just to see some numbers. Right now, I think there's basically no one on there as I launch this, so please check it out. One last thing before we go is that I'm very proud to tell you that this episode of Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom is again being brought to you in part by our sponsor, Stackery. Stackery is the global leader in international parcel forwarding from the U.S. to anywhere in the world. The way it works is that you shop at any U.S. retailer, you have your packages shipped to your Stackery address, and once everything has arrived, Stackery consolidates your stuff and ships it to you anywhere in the world, even China, saving you up to 80% of the shipping costs versus shipping things directly from the store. Stackery provides free storage, same-day consolidation of your packages, and a tax-free U.S. address for you to use, so you save extra money that way. Sign up today via the link in the show notes and use the offer code BIGFISH at the checkout to save 10% off your first shipment. All right, that's all for now. The show notes this week and moving forward will have time code references to various highlights of the episode, so you can skip around as you like. Plus, links to everything we discussed are also there. Check out crazyinagoodway.com for more. But now, please enjoy my second interview with Fei Wu. Well, I am very pleased to welcome back to the show returning champion Fei Wu. Fei, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Brandon. Thanks so much for having me back.
I'm glad to have you back for many reasons, and not the least of which is that you were unfortunately victim to some Skype gremlins on my end on the previous call, a previous interview. But mostly, there's so much that's been going on with you. We've become pals and stay in touch, and my episode of your show where I was a guest aired recently, which was, again, I said this publicly, but thank you again. It's really great. I've got
thank you.
Lovely feedback from people on that. But I know so much has been going on with you, and so I wanted to give a chance for the listeners to hear about what you were doing with your recent trip to China and then kind of what's coming from there. So I know you were recently here in Zhuhai, if I'm pronouncing it correctly-ish.
Yes, that's great. Zhuhai is perfect.
Excellent. And what brought you to Zhuhai?
My mom had been living there. She's still, living there, working there. And I wanted to go back and visit her. I had been to Zhuhai before, but I never really lived there. And this time I basically stayed there for almost exactly 3 weeks. And so instead of feeling it like a super rushed trip, I felt like a local, and I was there. It was fascinating because it's also, for your listeners, many of them probably do know where it is, but it's close to Guangzhou, a city in Guangdong province. So, there's a lot happening, and Zhuhai is the closest city, I think, in mainland China, right between Macau and Hong Kong. And as you know, there's a huge bridge being built there. So there's just a lot of new activities, new faces, and a lot of excitement there.
Well, that's interesting to hear because I only know a tiny bit about it. I've never been there. I've been to Hong Kong a lot, haven't been to Macau, and haven't been to Guangdong. So what would you characterize for people like me who don't know, what is Zhuhai sort of most well known for, would you say?
So Zhuhai in two Chinese characters means the Pearl Sea. So it's right next to the ocean. I think it may have one of the longest coastline in China. Don't quote me on this, but you literally drive, you drive through the city and you can drive through the coastline quite a bit. And there are huge parks nearby. And so the way I would think that what's really memorable about this place is, I think, the weather is often wonderful, especially during the winter seasons, unlike where you are in Beijing. And people are very, very friendly. I was surprised. So unlike, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, everybody's rushing, right? You got that New Yorker kind of look and feel.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, Zhuhai people are very chill. And some people tell me, the locals tell me that they're maybe too chill. Yeah. To me, I felt really safe in the area, even late at night, where I was hanging out, or where my mom is staying, is kind of called the old town of Zhuhai. So it's not the super modern, right? All the buildings super slick and brand new. This place, it's old school, so it had all these shops right in front of the apartment buildings. Feels a little bit noisy and all, but I felt very safe. People are friendly. Like when I try to buy things, which I did a lot of, just shopping. Everybody's, nobody's pushy. Very honest. It was, kind of refreshing to me.
That's really cool. And your mom likes it there, I guess. I mean, if she didn't like it, she wouldn't be there. How long has she been down there?
She's been there for a year or so, and she's been traveling back and forth between China and the U.S., and she absolutely loves it there. The pace of life and the friends that she's made there truly make her very happy. Not to mention, one of my favorite things we talked about briefly is that, food, obviously, but also massage and sort of the massage therapy treatments come in a variety of shape and forms. We can talk about that too.
Fantastic.
And it's so affordable, right?
Mm-hmm. So they're kind of known for like the spa treatment, health and wellness is a characteristic of the city.
Absolutely. Yeah, people have the patience and I guess the money too. I don't
Hmm.
think I even looked into Wikipedia for like income and salary. And I don't
Hmm.
think it's considered to be a very wealthy city necessarily, but people do enjoy their lives and they know how to treat themselves.
Well, that's pretty good to know. So it's a higher standard of living, but for more of a bargain price. Sounds like we're doing an ad for Zhuhai. I'm going to have to
For
visit.
Juhai, please do.
I'm going to have to visit.
It's up and coming.
So, in addition to your mom being there, and I know a bit of the answer to this, but please tell the listeners, as I was saying in the intro, and I will, of course, set this up with an intro to contextualize it as well. But tell us a little bit about what you were doing there besides visiting your mom and having a bit of a vacation. What was sort of your main activities, and then we'll talk about where this is leading.
Sure. It's actually through my mom's connections and relationship. Well, a bit of a context and background is the year before, which was 2016 into 2017, my mom decided to basically participate in a charity auction at the Red Cross in Zhuhai, in the city of Zhuhai. And so she donated a ton of her paintings, I would say dozens of work, and all of them, except for one piece, were sold to people who are interested in art, so not just experts, and they're at an affordable price. And then she gave nearly all the money away to charity.
Wow.
So yeah, that's
very nice.
she made friends instantly, as you can imagine,
Sure,
as her
sure.
act of her, what she really cares about. She didn't even know how to really participate or to act as participate as a volunteer. So I went back to China and my mom just kind of put a bug in my ear before my trip and said, bring your recording equipments, bring the mics, bring the stuff that you would normally bring with you to record your podcasts in the US. So I did that. I even brought my camera. I mean, imagine halfway around the world, I felt like that was half of my luggage, if not all of it. So I showed up. And I ended up interviewing two groups of people, the entrepreneurs who are part of the Red Cross Association, and they're all very, very successful. I also interviewed another group of people who are volunteers. Some of them have been with the organization for more than 20 years, and there's so many super interesting, juicy stories that they're willing to share with me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I did.
Well, for the sake of, I guess most people are probably aware of the Red Cross. What would you say keeps the Red Cross the busiest in that specific area, if anything? I mean, do they have a certain natural disaster they're known to have to deal with, or
Oh my God.
what is sort of their wheelhouse in that specific area? If you can talk about that.
I'm so glad you asked the question. I think you've done your homework really well because
Well,
last year.
that'll be your impression. So I'm
Well,
trying.
as you know, there was a huge disaster in southern part of China that literally impacted the Guangdong province, especially near the coastal area. So that makes the worst places to be Zhuhai, Macau, Hong Kong, and I believe it was a kind of extreme hurricane that came in that area. It was reported worldwide. So Red Cross, along with many other organizations, basically were the major rescue forces to help people. And, they were their donations of goods or blood. And I know people, I interviewed people who are right then and there, men and women, to, to really be there for weeks on ends. And just the stories were really incredible.
And what did this kind of prompt you to? I want to move into talking about Himalaya without spoiling it. I guess I just did. But were you thinking another reason that I wanted to talk was because I know that you have been brainstorming this Chinese show on and off. We talked about it a bit. You mentioned it on your show in other contexts in your intros, and specifically my episode. You talk about you sort of announced it a bit there. So for the sake of people who do not live here. Could you maybe introduce Himalaya and then what you're workshopping and how this all kind of ties together?
Sure. So for your listeners and some of mine, maybe I've been running the English podcast in the U.S. I've been producing them, in Boston for the past 3.5 years. And I realized recently that I never called myself a bilingual podcaster, but I am, because I actually was born and raised in Beijing, China, where you are, Brendan. And I realized, man, what a shame if I don't produce another series. It's also Faye's World, but in Chinese and using a very similar style. But this time I actually want to approach with a season approach. Like season 1, in this case, will be about the stories from the Red Cross. So I was really excited, but part of me that was a little hesitant was, one, I did produce a couple of episodes in Chinese. One happens to be with my mom, which was a very successful episode in both US and also in China. I kind of just secretly, silently uploaded that episode to Ximalaya.
Okay.
And yeah, it really outperformed, exceeded my expectation. And the other episode I did was with my a childhood friend, a female friend of mine, Lulu Chang, and she was born and raised in Macau. She studied in the U.S., and by the time we're in our, I guess, late 20s or so, she moved to Paris to work there for a year. And I thought, how interesting, right? She's all over the place, and since then, she's been traveling around the world by herself too, onto many different continents. And so I interviewed her, and both episodes are so well received, but I was hesitant because my Chinese still doesn't sound quite the same as local Chinese podcasters. So, but now I think I just overcame my own doubts and fears and realized I can speak my own language normally. When you live in the U.S. for so long, the accent starts to change and evolve.
Yeah, you're like half and half now. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, you're like half and half because you've been basically a little over half your life in the U.S. now.
Yeah. You know what's funny? The other day, as in yesterday, I signed up at a local gym recently, and I've been dancing every day. So we'll be Zumba, and then there's another class called the Dance Jam. Yesterday, I realized that as much as I always thought I was half, sort of half Chinese, half American culturally, but deep down, natively, I always know that I'm Chinese, right? So, I realized I wasn't just half. I was a little bit of everything. I just watching the dance instructor, she looked kind of half Asian, maybe half American, half African, and she spoke English and French, and she had all these jazz in her. And I realized the beauty of traveling around the world and living in multiple places, that you are a little bit of everything. I consider myself a little bit Italian, maybe after befriending Italian people eating Italian food. So who knows? Who's to say, right?
Right. So you made these initial forays onto Ximalaya, and they are very well received, but you haven't continued to feed that channel in any way. I mean, I know from my own experience, for the sake of, there are a handful of people who listen to this show who would know that for the initial, let's say 10 or 12 of these, when I was at my old company and my awesome assistant, Lolliot, I would write a short blog post and she would translate it into Chinese. So we would do like a bilingual post. And we made a bit of an effort to push these podcasts out on Ximalaya, but because it's in English, and of course that's not why people go to Ximalaya. So they're going there to, hear and experience Chinese. So, and we got busy and we just kind of let that drop. And I'm very sad about that because it's such a massive platform. It's funny because in the world of podcasting, and those of us who do it and kind of track this, of course, iTunes is the 800-pound, gorilla in the room. Ximalaya, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but Ximalaya is like 3 or 4 times bigger already. Yeah. And podcasting is like a new thing in China. It's growing. It's ascending. So you can get on Ximalaya and kind of really own an interesting space. That's why I want to share this with the audience, because I think what you're going to do is going to be pretty cool. What's your angle on your show for this, you think? You have your first season kind of planned out, but just generally speaking, what's your approach, you think, for Ximalaya?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. I have to take half a step back and talk about getting English podcasts, or meaning podcasters who either record in English, even other languages like Spanish, Italian, maybe sound like you're pushing it, maybe, but you just never know. So I want to comment quickly on what you said, because right now I'm also in the process of developing an online course to educate there's only a beta version right now, but I definitely think that there's more than just an opportunity. There is a promise in what people can do from around the world to share their podcasts on Ximalaya. And the reason, as you know, Brendan, is because when you go to Ximalaya today, XimalayaFM, is that there are currently a fixed number of English podcasts and very, very few interviews like the one that we're producing right now.
Right.
But most of them are studying is all about learning English, which I totally get it.
Right.
And isn't that crazy? I mean, Brendan, if you just shift your focus and start teaching English,
I could have a really, really crazy popular show on there if that was what I was doing. But
right.
not enough hours in the day, and I'm more interested in this. But yes, that's definitely a space that's ripe for some innovation, actually.
Yeah, exactly. I think there are a very few countable interview format, sort of podcasts, which I find also very fascinating. Some of them are good, some not so much. So if people want to learn English or bring their English learning to another level, instead of just conversational or very kind of fixed and dry business English, this is the type of show they should listen to. So because they don't, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. Because they don't exist, people are not listening. So I'm excited about that.
Fantastic. Well, I didn't even know this. So there you go. Well, I know somebody who's going to be a early sign-up or adoptee of this. this guy right here.
Please. Beta.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll add you to it.
Please do put me into the Work Out the Kinks group. So when are you sort of hoping to launch this first season that you've got all these Red Cross and related interviews? I guess you and your team are working to kind of chop and sort all of that. But when are you sort of looking to go live? And also, again, people listening to this are used to the normal podcast paradigm, but with Ximalaya, the blog post, it's often very much part of it. So can you maybe talk about the slight difference? But it's not just a pure kind of podcast platform. It's really a little more multimedia.
Sure. This is super helpful. I'm thinking after you launch this episode, I can immediately release out to the beta testers of Faye's first online course ever. And then they kind of get the approach.
Please,
so for people,
please, yeah. If you want to repurpose this to use it somehow, you may be my guest.
Awesome. Oh, yeah, definitely. I might just take 10, 15 minutes of it. So for listeners or especially podcasters who are or listeners who are interested in listening to the Chinese version of Faye's World podcast, I have a little mini calendar in my office right now. We're aiming to launch in June. So to safely plan the launch, I think will be middle of June. I don't have the exact date yet, but sure. For people who are interested, they can go to definitely faceworld.com/newsletter. I'm definitely going to announce it there. And so to answer your other question, what is the sort of the anatomy of Ximalaya looks like? It's so interesting. Like you said, it's a one-stop shop in a very scary way. I think XimalayaFM is sort of comparable to WeChat, where for people, again, who don't know WeChat, is you use it for chat, for recording, for sending infinite emojis. It's your own blog. It's where you store credit cards.
It's payments. Yeah.
Payments.
It's very common
crazy
to leave your house with just your phone and your keys in China.
Absolutely.
No wallet. I know girls that don't carry a purse anymore, and they love it. You have your phone and your keys and your earbuds, and you're basically set.
You're all set, and Ximalaya is exactly like that for podcasters. So, for comparison purpose, like for us who upload our episodes to whatever our hosting service, and then they get trickled down to iTunes and everywhere else, it's such a night and day experience, because iTunes, even until today, gives you such limited stats, like one page, barely like subscribers, maybe Whereas in Himalaya, like you said, you actually don't want to direct people to go to your like faceworld.com. You almost don't want to do that because it's so contained, self-contained. And the level at a high level, I would say, is, you create a profile. That's your profile, for example, Faceworld, but then you create all these additional albums. And albums are, for me, one album could be the English podcast. The other album could be the Chinese podcast. You could even have another version to say you can release by season if you want, to use album as an approach. And it's absolutely crazy. So one more thing I would say, I recently checked out their mobile version. So you can record your show. You can, very similar to that app called Anchor, Anchor. You can hold a button and use a microphone or not, and just, record your episode and then immediately release it. Right? Or you can record it live, and people, if you have listeners, they'll be waiting and responding to it immediately. I mean, it's just all the bells and whistles. I don't think we can spend weeks talking about it, so I'm just going to stop.
Okay. Well, one thing, I'm sure as you work on this, and again, I'm happy to maybe wade into your beta group on this to offer some 2 cents, but at least when we set up and it still exists. There's an old Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom channel, and it's got my old logo. It's got my temp logo from the early days of the show. But the one tricky part is it is all Chinese. And I don't read and write. I speak enough to be dangerous, but it is all Chinese, and also you must have like a Chinese ID to create it. At least you did when I did it. So these are possible hurdles. I don't know if any of this has changed, but so I had to have. Yes, my assistant was like the co-producer of that particular version of the show, so she had to technically set it up. So I don't know if that's changed, or that's one potential hurdle to deal with. It may be a little too much in the weeds for people to care about. But so there are these barriers to entry, but they can be overcome. You just have to be, like a lot of things with China, you have to be China flexible, and you have to adapt. And as far as Himalaya itself, as you were saying, also I was going to say you sort of have a microsite, but it's bigger than that. Your actual homepage on Himalaya is really a mini website, or it can be. So there are people who do. You would know maybe some of the names, not to put you on the spot, but there are several of the people who are some of these top selling and performing people. I know that there are people who do, like, there's a guy, or there's probably a lot of people, but there's like the one guy who's the rock star of reinterpreting classic texts, and there's the guy that's like, he's the storyteller of the folklore stories from his childhood, and he's reinterpreting them, and he's basically just doing storytelling. And they have numbers that would make Tim Ferriss like blanch.
Oh,
they have
my
numbers
God, like 10 times Tim Ferriss. Get
everybody.
ready.
It's insane.
Mark Maron.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
So the market is really massive. I'm really excited you're doing this. So you are going to do some English language content on there yourself, you think?
I think so. I'm just for the because why not? And I do believe there's going to be listeners who are interested in English podcasts. And why don't I be I'm not the very first, but why don't I explore that a little bit? Maybe tell a story back. I mean, if we connect 6 months again, whenever from now, I'm going to, because I already have 150 episodes in English. Right. Why don't I just upload, imagine 1 episode a day? That's half a year.
Exactly. I was going to say, you have your existing catalog to work with. And as long as you had the bandwidth to have someone helping you, with it, whether I don't know if you probably haven't done Chinese language versions of all your blog posts. That's kind of the big challenge. No. That's kind of the big challenge. I'm going to throw away some.
I know. I'm going to throw away some tips and tricks. I'm thinking about dreaming, but it's not validated yet.
Cool.
So, a lot of the normal podcasters, like the way that we've been managing our shows, is that. I should probably speak for myself. Is our shows tend to evolve from time to time naturally, because we're not, CNBC and whatever. That's like, this is it, and this is always going to be the format. It's been approved by 16 people. So we tend to interview different people. Like, I'm a one-off. I'm a different type of guests that that appear on your show.
Right.
So I think there's opportunity now. Now I can actually say, take a step back. I re-look at Himalaya as if I were starting this all over again. I could make very different strategic decisions on how I'm going to organize my show. For example, instead of launching the episode like I have, which is based on, recency, if you navigate all Face World, and you realize there are a lot of different types of people, from Cirque du Soleil artists to medicine, to doctors. And now I can actually go to Himalaya, create very different albums, and say one is Face World / circus artist or performing artists. The other's Face World / medicine. I can reorganize, rejigger everything and see if that could actually have a different impact on my show. So that's just something I'm contemplating.
I think that's a really great idea, and you have enough material. In the process of a little under the hood conversation, for a second about people who follow this show. I'm working on a bit of a redesign of my website right now, and behind the scenes, it's not live yet, but it includes how you have yours categorized, and I'm toying with either grouping them myself, or they're already tagged, but like basically verifying the tags and then making a tag search that's like a meta thing in the menu, so you can quickly search and pull those up. But I think that's really useful, and because if somebody wants to drill down in a topic area, a certain subject, then they're all organized already. You can just create a playlist and just rock right through it.
Exactly. You create a playlist. Yep. I think that's super interesting. You had asked me another good question a few minutes ago about how I approach maybe my Chinese show.
Yes,
what is the setup? Exactly. What is the stylistic considerations for that?
How is it going to differ? Because people, and again, I'm not just plugging a friend, but I mean, it doesn't have to be mine. Listen to any episode of Face Show if you haven't. You guys, you and your team, I mean, there's music scores and, there's musical cues. It's very specifically scored. And from my own experience, I know we did our interview, but then things that thematically fit are kind of then regrouped together. So your show has a lot of post-production currently, which is time-consuming. So how's your show going to? Is it going to look like Phase World with a Chinese accent, or is it going to be a different animal entirely?
I think what I want to focus on is to test it a little bit. And you're right, Brendan, like to add that music. We also have sound bites at the beginning. Sound bites here we refer to, like 30 seconds, a minute of what we think that are some of the best quotes, favorite quotes from the show. Tease that out at the beginning. Yeah. So I don't think we're going to do that because it is very time consuming. And I don't know if it's entirely necessary or helpful to the Chinese audience. So what I did, lessons learned, when I was in China, because I was meeting a lot of people for the first time, hopefully not the last time, I don't really have a very necessary or strong personal relationship with them. So I made sure to mention their name, introduce them at the beginning of the show, which that I don't do that for the English version of the show at all. I almost never introduce them when I get on the call. I always record a separate voice intro, but for the Chinese version, I'm going to simplify the process and see if it makes a difference. You will hear a little bit of a light music, and I will have a voice intro. It's going to sound the same for you to ID it quickly, and then immediately roll into what the interview is about with a very brief introduction of the guest.
I think that's a good approach, and it's there's certain shows like I love the show The Moment with Brian Koppelman, and I love him. Isn't that a fun show? And he
is amazing. Billions, right?
Totally,
I mean,
totally.
Who produced any shows like that?
Co-creator of Rounders, the movie, and Billions, and a bunch of other stuff. And if people don't know his show, he does that approach where, I mean, he has someone doing his post. There's a musical cue at the beginning and end, and then of course, and they do ad drops. They have pre-recorded ads that somebody's slicing in, and someone's kind of picking the moments to slice in the ad reads. But his conversation with people, and there may be chunks that are cut out because who knows what comes up or that runs into a wall conversationally. But he does the intro with the person sitting in the room or on the Skype with him, and so he does that intro with the person. Basically, the person is quiet as he starts, and then he kind of brings them into it. So it's like, now that I totally embarrassed you, what do you have to say? And then they kind of launch. But I think it's practical. in terms of economy. But as you're saying, if you don't know, I think it's maybe it's even, I don't know if I should make a giant generalization. It's not a negative one, but it's probably even more important in terms of respect and face value to get the person's name out here locally. And if you are not actually close with them, not to act like, I mean, we do have kind of an easy familiarity as Americans. There's a bit of a, oh, hey, and you don't really know the person, but you just, that's kind of our approach. And in China, you kind of need to not assume an over familiarity with people.
Yeah, absolutely agree. There's definitely a bit of a cultural difference here. But just hearing you say that about Brian Koppelman, I'm thinking I might take this similar approach too for my English episodes because, I'm always behind. My producer's done a great job. And he's like, I'm waiting on that voice intro. I'm like, oh, man.
Yeah, we recorded 4 months ago, and a few things, as you edited the episode, there was nothing that I would feel I need to do an addendum on, but there were things that we recorded in the interview initially that hit the cutting room floor, fortunately. I talked about twice as much as people heard, for the sake of people listening. It was a 45-minute episode, and we talked an hour and a half. But, there were things that had changed. There were some kind of significant things that had changed, and that they didn't end up being a factor in the edited interview. But yeah, it would, in terms of economy, it would. You think you might start playing with that for Faye's World proper? I
think so. I want to try different things. I think sometimes we're all too set on the format. I think it's important to know the structure that you're leading with, but it's also okay to change. I think some podcasters, we take ourselves a little too seriously sometimes, and we need to kind of loosen up and take new approach and try different things, because you never know. Brennan, as we put in a lot of heart and soul and blood and tears and whatever into it, and we go so gung-ho. We believe in everything we set out to do, but sometimes the tiny little bit of change may really surprise us in a good way.
I think you might, just my 2 cents worth. I think you might enjoy it, and not everybody can do that. You can do it. I mean, what people are going to hear from this, even as I track it, because I do my own editing. We had a couple of dropouts that I'm going to have to, where you picked it up and we had to stitch together, but people won't really hear that. I don't think I'm removing any content unless I ramble on too much like now. So, but you're very, you're very facile with this. And frankly, you make it look easy when I know that it's not always. So let's maybe, as we sort of wrap up here, I appreciate your time. We got a 12-hour time difference, so it's getting into your evening there pretty well. What you mentioned to me before we started recording that you've been making a lot of other changes. What's new in Fei Wu's world?
I guess one thing I'll throw out there is I am in the middle of planning for a documentary. That's a really big change to what we're doing. And I know it's not just a huge commitment from me, but for everybody involved. I have my audio producer, video producer, definitely a sound guy, an animator at some point, people involved. But the core team, we're talking about maybe 4 people or so. It feels daunting, but it's so exciting at the same time. We're still figuring out the cities we need to go to, the guests we want to introduce on the show, and maybe even people outside of the show that we want to invite as documentary guests. And so, and then what we are, I wouldn't say that the struggling with, but maybe we're working through is the through line. What is the theme? What is the thing that grabs people? And why should they watch beyond the first minute, which is where the most drop off happens. So we're working that out. But one thing I will say is this is not a documentary purely about podcasters and podcasting. Instead, it's about seeing the possibilities of running a podcast through the eyes of a podcaster, in this case, me. And in some ways, in so many ways, it has transformed me. And in other ways, it has maybe transformed some of my guests' lives as well, and maybe made their lives easier, more interesting. And specifically, a lot of my guests and myself have collaborated on so many projects that I'm so proud of. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, I am very happy that we got a chance to catch up. And Faye, is there anything else that you would like to share with my audience before I let you get on with your night?
Sure. Thank you, Brendan, first of all, for what you're doing. I am really impressed by the community you've built online, on Facebook, your website, and also through WeChat. The final thing I would say is I have made a decision in 2018 to really take care of myself as a creator. I know I'm still talking about a lot of projects, but I want to just send that vibe and the message out. This is still work in progress, which is me. But if you are a creator, if you're a podcaster, or if you're just a listener, but you have other amazing projects to work on and you're crazy about, please take care of yourself first, because there isn't enough said about self-care. And that's usually, unfortunately, oftentimes the last thing that we pay attention to. So please take care and spend more time with family and friends, and spend more time with the people that you love and adore. That's the most precious things in life.
Faye, that's a really lovely place to end it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right, that's the show this week. I hope you enjoyed that. Please check out Faye's World as well as her other endeavors at faysworld.com. Check out crazyinagoodway.com for links to everything I discussed at the top of this episode. Thanks again, and I will see you again next week.